Good morning. Good afternoon. We have our panelists range from Pacific time in the US to the UK. So we have all of our time zones, or a number of the time zones covered here today. I'm Sherry Steinig. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Communications at Generations United. We're just really thrilled with the interest and turnout today. Since there are so many of us, and this is a Zoom meeting, not a webinar, please keep yourself muted. We'll also be monitoring sometimes, accidentally you can come off mute, and we'll try to keep folks on mute so that we can hear our presenters. And we will be using chat to communicate. So while we're getting started, if folks could just put their name, affiliation, and where you're Zooming in from today in chat. We're also going to have time for questions and answers after our presentation. So you can also use chat to share, to put any questions or comments or any other resources, information you want to share. We are recording this webinar and we'll share the recording with everyone who registered as well as post it on our website. And then just to reiterate, Nancy brought this up, that the session today is 90 minutes. We have 4 panelists or 4 presenters, as well as, we want to have some time for Q&A. So we know that not everyone may be able to stay for the full time, but we hope that you will. Most of you probably know Generations United, but for those of you who don't, Generations United is a national nonprofit that works to strengthen practices and policies to benefit all generations. And we've been around for over 30 years now doing that work. And what we really aim to do is to build connections among people who are doing the work. So folks that are interested, committed to bringing younger and older people together. And today's session is one of those opportunities. So today we're going to be talking about enhancing intergenerational connections through the arts. It's presented as part of our shared site learning network, which is made possible with support from the Eisner Foundation. Again, we are just thrilled today for today's session. We have a great group of presenters and look forward to learning more about the intergenerational artwork that you're doing as well. I did want to direct you to the most recent issue of our shared site newsletter, which Nancy wrote and edited. I will put a link in the chat as soon as our presentations get started, which is all about intergenerational art. So our panelists today, their work is included in that, as well as a number of other really amazing intergenerational art programs. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my co-convener of these meetings, Nancy Henkin. Nancy's the founder and former executive director of the Intergenerational Center at Temple University. And we, and me personally, are so grateful that since leaving that position, she decided to become part of our team at GU as a senior fellow. So Nancy, take it away.
Thank you. I thought you were going to say co-conspirator.
I actually...
It was close. Well, it's wonderful to see all of you. I know some of you. I don't know all of you. I'm sitting here in my living room in Philadelphia, and I'm so excited to have people from all over the world, certainly all over the United States, but all over the world too, join us for this. When we're thinking about what to focus on for our newsletters and our webinars, we come up with lots of ideas, and we'd love ideas from you on what kinds of things you'd like to focus on. But I've always loved the arts and started thinking about, what's going on in intergenerational arts, particularly after COVID, and has there been a reemergence? Have people been able to sustain it? So I've been on a lot of phone calls with many of you, and it's very exciting to see what you're thinking, what your plans are, and what you have been doing, even through the challenge of COVID. So today is going to be a special day. We have 4 very good presenters who are at different stages of their programs, who work with different age groups, with different art forms. We could have had 20 people on this, but we picked 4 that represent different areas. And we hope this will be the beginning of, a conversation around how intergenerational arts can really be integrated into your work, into your intergenerational work, to reduce loneliness and isolation, to promote empathy, and to really enhance the quality of life for people across the lifespan. So I'm not going to talk much. I will ask some questions later, and I want you to be thinking about questions and writing them in the chat. And I think Sherry and Alanka will keep track of that. And then after our presentations, we will have hopefully a really exhilarating discussion about the value of the arts. So we're going to start with Susan. Susan is in London. So we are starting with, it's 5 o'clock her time, I think. So I guess you're at the end of work, Susan. Susan is the director of Magic Me, which is, I think, about 35 years old. And I think I met Susan years ago at one of the conferences, intergenerational conferences, and I had a chance to be with her again in London a few weeks ago. So Magic Me's been doing terrific things around England, and we're very excited to have Susan here telling us a little bit about what's going on there and giving us some tips. So Susan, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy and Sherry, and thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this afternoon. It means that I get to hear what's going on in the States as well, and to meet a lot of you, which is great. I've got 10 to 15 minutes was my brief, and I want to tell you something about our program. As Nancy says, I've been working on Magic Me for over 35 years here in London, and our Magic Me grew out of the pioneering work of Kathy Levin Shapiro in Baltimore. I met Kathy when she was in London back in 1986, and she told me what she was doing in Baltimore, and it inspired me as a community artist to try intergenerational arts for the first time. And we set up independently here as a charity in 1989. For us, can I have the next slide, please? We haven't agreed a code word, but next slide will do.
Next, probably.
So, for us, younger people starts at 8. I know we've got other even younger people being talked about here this evening, but for us it's 8+ and our older people are kind of 55, 60+. Independently living in the community, living in sheltered housing or extra care schemes, and living in care homes. So a real range of older people, and working with schools and non-school groups as well. Last year, we served around 560 people altogether, with audiences of many thousands for the artworks and the films that they made. And that was a smaller year because of COVID, but now we're growing back and we're building up again. Next slide, please. So I guess this is what we're about. We want to inspire change for individuals, communities, and systems through extraordinary art, sparking magic between generations. And for us, it's important what's happening in the room this afternoon. What are we doing together? But it's also about changing minds, changing systems in a bigger way, long term. We think the arts are fantastic for doing that. They bring joy, excitement, exploration, purpose, sense of achievement in what is made or what is done. And the quality of that art and the activity is very important to us. We think that the quality of the art made makes people feel good about themselves, and making together is most important as well. Potential for change in those systems and for individuals is higher. Can I have the next slide, please? The arts offer ways for people to see the world differently, see each other differently, and see themselves differently. And one man, an older man in a group, once said to us, everyone in this room has got at least one big talent, and it's our job to find out what it is. And sometimes those talents are buried deep. People have lost their confidence or never had much of it. But I think another word of wisdom I had from a much younger person, a boy of about 8 or 9, many years ago at the beginning of Magic Me, was he said, why is it called Magic Me? And I guess it's a question I've had many times from children and from adults. And it was just when he was starting to visit older people. And I said, well, you wait a few weeks and ask me the question again, and let's see if you can answer the question. And when I put the question back to him and his fellow pupils in the school, he said, well, miss, it's like this. It's like when we go to the old people's home, we take a magic carpet with us and we unroll it, and we can all get on it and we can go wherever we like. And I think as a description of what the arts can bring to any of us, but particularly to people who don't get out much, people who are often in the same spaces, in the same rooms, and all of us during COVID and the lockdowns, I think that's what the arts can do for us, that transformative journey we can go on. So I want to keep that in mind as we go through for the next few minutes. So in a few minutes, I want to cover 6 principles that Magic Me has developed over 3 years for our intergenerational arts practice. We use those across all kinds of different art forms with different age groups. So the junior school, which is up to 10 or 11, the secondary school, and young adults. And I've also popped in here some family work that we did a few years back, though we're not doing that at the moment. And to touch as well on ageism and challenging ageism, which is an essential thread running through all of Magic Me's work. So next slide, please. So our first principle is that everyone, whatever the age, has a past, a present, a future, and an imagination. That's important to us because often people tell us what we do and they assume it's about children hearing stories from older people and turning that into an artwork, a performance, a film, something. And we have done that, and it's lovely, and there's nothing wrong with it. So I don't want to stop people doing that. But for us, intergenerational work is about older people having a future and an imagination, and younger people have a past. When you're 8, you have been a lot of places and done a lot of things. And I conjured to mind 2 people on a Magic Me project, a little girl called Simone, who was about 9, and a woman, Magda, 83, living in a care home. And one day I was looking at them having a conversation and doing some artwork around the dilemmas of Sorry, I just got muted then. So Simone and Magda were having a conversation, doing some artwork, and I realized that there was 180 years in that conversation. So we had Magda with her 83 years behind her and her future, and we had Simone with her 80 years hopefully ahead of her. It's a huge amount of material for a great arts project. Next slide, please. So here we have 3 men who came together because they all love boxing. So they made masks and then they posed in their characters for the boxing ring. Next slide, please. Our second principle is that exchange between people is vital. It's not enough to have younger and older people working alongside each other, doing the same thing in the same room. We need to set that activity up so people are gaining and giving. People are getting other people's points of view, and the artwork that is made is different to if they had worked separately on their own or in their peer groups. And to get us thinking into that, I'd just like you to imagine for a moment that you're in an arts workshop, and I'm asking you if you would draw a picture of the place where you live. And so pick up a pencil or pretend that you've got one and just start to draw on the desk or the table or your paper. And what you do when you do that is you go into your head to where you live and you have a relationship with a piece of paper in front of you. And you don't really need the person sitting next to you. If I say to you, will you pair up with the person sitting next to you and draw a picture of where they live, and they'll draw one of you, your place, then you immediately have a conversation, you have questions, you have comparisons, and you start to get to know someone else as well. That will be different for different art forms. And one of our artists has described, a puppeteer has described it as she invents activities that need 3 hands to do them, so that you can't do it on your own. You've got to get somebody else engaged. And she makes things out of huge pieces of cloth and material. So you have to have a lot of people holding them. So that's a top tip, is invent something that you can't do on your own. And then people are more likely to ask their others. Next slide, please. So here we had work taking place in Hackney, which is in East London, young people from a young people's theatre group working with local Black Elders group and creating a play about things that had happened recently in their area, not good things, and what they wanted the future to come out of that. So it was a real exchange of very recent past, which they'd all experienced. Next slide, please. And here, people in family workshops, grandparents or great-grandparents and children, focused on the crown jewels at the Tower of London as a starting point. Next slide. So the group went to visit the crown jewels, but then they made family jewels for their own family. And they brought in their heritage, their history, recent historical places they'd been and travelled. Next slide. And it was really about that exchange and people finding out unexpected things about people they've known for years. So here's some of the beautiful stuff they made. Next slide. And then we had a great big posing session where they got into groups. And it was joyful to watch people discover, as I say, things about people they thought they knew. Next slide. I do feel I'm romping here, but here we go. Principle 3, relationship building is conscious, not accidental. And by that, I mean, it's designed into the activities. It's not enough to invite everyone in and hope they're going to get on, hope they're going to talk to each other. It's within the different tasks that we go through together. And for us, having artists who can do that is essential. They're people who can pick up on these principles and go beyond, bringing great art forms, arts skills, critical thinking about the work that's being made, but also can really tune into people, the responses, and help them to respond to one another. Next slide. So here, a puppeteer, the one who I said likes three-handed activities. Next slide. And the people behind, oh, lost a slide. Okay. Go back to the puppets, please. So people working together to create a puppet show with lights and shadow puppets is actually a very simple thing to do. You can take that in lots of different directions. But there always being time as well for the children to meet on their own a bit, and for the grandparents in this case to meet on their own for a bit and have some space with their peers. It doesn't have to be enforced jollity, enforced exchange all the time. Sometimes people need to relax, go perhaps into their comfort zones. So you will know your groups. You can play with that. Next slide, please. So principle number 4, our younger and older people come together as equal partners with a common purpose. So the artwork is often that common purpose. It's something to group around. It's something that's more important than us as individuals. So it gets us through perhaps some of the sticky bits or the competitive bit in relationship building. Next slide, please. So here we have the people behind the scenes of that puppet show and working in their pairs. And that common purpose can be a lovely thing like making a puppet show for your family and friends. It can also be tackling some tough issues. Next slide. So we've had a relationship with a local girls' school, Marbury School for Girls, over 15 or 16 years now, and done an annual project with them and local older women. And over a couple of years, interrupted by COVID, the group focused on climate action and what they could do and the power of intergenerational activism. They were seeing it as often it was presented as the older people have messed up the planet, the young people are left with the mess to clear up, and what can they do? And this group felt they had equal voice in that. Next slide. They worked on making posters, they made some films, they invited their local member of parliament to a Zoom to talk to her about how you take power. And they applied to the COP26 conference in Glasgow when it happened, and they presented by Zoom link to an international audience at COP to say intergenerational activism is the way forward. Next slide, please. And they looked at some of the things that stop us being activists and stop us making change in our communities and how we can come together of people of different ages. Next slide, please. And what stops us? What are the systems that get in the way? So there were some really in-depth, difficult conversations to be had. But what they said was intergenerational art making means silenced voices can get heard. They gave power to one another with their experience, with their ideas. Next slide, and I know I'm coming more or less to the end. Principle 5, we are all aging, not just those in society labelled old. Aging is sometimes starts to be given to you when you've got grey hair, but you're aging from birth to death. And I think that's one of the ways that intergenerational can start to chip away at ageism is by meeting with those people who are different to you, people who are ahead of you in the aging curve, maybe. It's an invitation to come as who you are. We might invite you as younger or older, but once you're there, we take those labels away and people are the confident person, the shy person, the tall person, the short person. They're the people who love this or love that. And we want high expectations of the arts and the activities for everybody who's in that room. Next slide. So our sixth principle is around challenging ageism, and it's our vision of Magic Me, which is a world without ageism, where everyone can enjoy their unique creativity and full potential. And I guess how we think the intergenerational arts can do that is that they bring enjoyment in the moment, which is obviously really important, particularly for people living with a dementia. Week by week, people meet, they build those relationships and grow their artwork and grow their relationships. But then those artworks or those films can be put out, ripple out into the community, into families, into society, and challenge some of the thoughts that people have about young people or older people in their neighborhood or wider. And hopefully to some of those political people who make the decisions about our lives. And that can inspire the change. So next slide, please. I just wanted to throw up a couple of examples of fighting ageism, and then I'm going to stop. This was something we called Cocktails in Care Homes, which we ran for 10 years, and it finished in March 2020 when COVID came along and we couldn't meet anymore. But it was what it says on the tin. It was drinks parties for older people living in care homes who didn't get much company from outside, with adult volunteers coming in. The age for drinking alcohol in the UK is 18 plus. So if you're 18 plus, you could have a drink if it was safe and that was your wish, or you didn't have to. But we often found people being shocked that older people in care homes were allowed to have alcohol. And it was our way of challenging assumptions. We threw over 600 parties with cocktails in care homes. But often, next slide, please. Next slide. I've got to sync somewhere. If you want to bring this work into care homes, it's got to be about the agendas. So there, the older people said, we want something in the evening. Often the staff are saying, this is our agenda. And if you want it to stick, it's got to fit what people are needing. So it might be here around meal times, or it might be around a particular space that needs enlivening, or it might be around a particular group of children who could benefit from some attention one-to-one with some adults. Next slide, please. You will have your own reasons for wanting to do intergenerational arts and considering it as part of your program. So I would say, although I've shown you these examples, we have some nice big arts budgets sometimes. Some of the examples I've thrown have taken months. Start simple, get to know your partners, talk to people, build a relationship through doing simple things together, and the ideas will flow, and the right scale and shape for your situation will start to become apparent. And I'm going to leave it there. I don't think I've covered everything, Nancy, but
No, Susan, that was great. I mean, I really appreciate your basing this on some of the principles, because there, no matter what art forms we use, no matter what the intergenerational art making looks like, I think these principles are really important, particularly being equal partners and being intentional about relationships and fostering interaction. So you're doing great work there. I followed you for 35 years. Hopefully I'll follow you for a few more. And I hope other people will look at your website and see some of the things you're doing. So thanks, Susan. And again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will address them after we're through. So Jen, I saw you smiling and nodding your head a lot, because Jen at SilverKite has also been doing this for 10 years at SilverKite, but she said she's been doing intergenerational work for a long time. So Jen is the founder and the CEO of SilverKite Community Arts in Seattle, Washington. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about what you're doing over there. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Nancy. And Susan, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. I am so inspired. I loved so many of the program examples and principles you shared. So thank you for that. My name is Jen Kulik. I'm the founder and CEO of SilverKite Community Arts. We are based in Seattle and have been around for 10 years. I've been doing intergenerational programs myself for about 25 years in a bunch of different kinds of contexts, and decided to start SilverKite 10 years ago in a pursuit of strengthening our community by bringing generations together. So SilverKite does a lot of different kinds of things. In addition to our intergenerational arts programs, we're also creative engagement specialists. So we provide arts classes with older adults. We do professional development and consulting, and we also have a bunch of programs and arts engagement resources for folks that are interested in creating and facilitating arts programs with older adults, whether they be intergenerational programs or programs specifically designed for older adults. So we also operate with a bunch of different principles in the design of our intergenerational programs. Our primary one is about connection, and what Susan was saying about finding ways for folks to authentically connect as humans is really one of our principles as well. Our programs are designed so that everyone who participates is a teacher and a learner, as well as doing something vulnerable together. So everyone has a moment to shine, which is one of our principles as well. We really center our work around the idea of creative play and the research behind creative play. We create spaces where folks are encouraged to play and inspired to play by our professional teaching artists. We would like in our programs for everybody to make something either together or separately with a share. We have a bunch of different kinds of program models, which I'll share about in just a moment. Similar to also what Susan was sharing about feeling that sense of accomplishment, feeling successful at the end of the program is something that we're really focused on as well. And ultimately, we're looking to promote joy and fun and have people walk out of these experiences feeling good about themselves, feeling connected with each other, and wanting to come back and make future connections with people of different generations. So we focus on the arts because it enables us to help deepen those connections in ways that are unique to the arts. So the arts help us to establish some kind of common language. We often do programs with folks that may not have a common language that they speak. So by creating a piece of visual art or theater or music, it helps our souls to connect, and it helps ourselves be able to express ourselves as well as to learn from other people. Our arts programming is a container or structure for play, and as we know from the play researchers that we may refer to, play is important and valuable to us in all stages of the lifespan, and is something that we really essentially need in order to be happy and joyful and connect with our world outside of our current life experience. So creating these containers and structures for play is really an important reason for the work that we do. We also are trying to help folks find flow, meaning it enables us to relax and de-stress when we are engaged in making something that we feel excited about and creative. It also helps us to brainstorm and come up with some new ideas and new perspectives, similar to what Susan was saying, new perspectives about the world and about each other. And also that sense of accomplishment helps us to boost self-esteem and self-confidence. So SilverKite has essentially 3 different kinds of intergenerational arts programs that we do. So I wanted to talk a little bit about each of these to share some program models that might be useful to you. And then I'll also talk a little bit about some learnings and some tips that we recommend if you are to create a program like this yourselves. So our first type of intergenerational program are our school or an organizational-based intergenerational program. So we either work with a school and do a program connected to their curriculum, and they either can be short-term or long-term. We also partner with local arts organizations to create intergenerational programs. We're working on a new program, for example, with a local art museum and doing sort of an after-school program there. The second kind of programs we do are Arts for All intergenerational programs. So these are really fun, and I'm currently really obsessed with this idea of creating intergenerational programs in common spaces where folks are present but aren't intentionally connecting with each other. So just like Susan was saying, that intentional connection across those generations is something that's really important in our work. And we love literally popping up a tent in the middle of a park and inviting people who happen to be in the area to come by and make art together. And the magic things that happen in those moments where people are connecting with each other around a table making art is really inspiring and very cool. We also have an intergenerational theater company. We just finished our 11th production, which tours to senior living communities, schools, and other organizations in the Seattle area. This theater company has an intergenerational cast of actors that are sharing stories based on their lives and their life experiences, and we create them annually. So the difference between these kinds of programs is we see the school-based and organizational-based intergenerational programs as, either a shorter term or a longer term relationship building opportunity. The Arts for All intergenerational programs are kind of an intergenerational taster. So you get a sense and a feeling of what it feels like to sit down at a table and make art with each other. And the Intergenerational Theater Company serves as a model for intergenerational relationships as it tours around to different communities. So those are the different types of programs that we do and how they kind of function together. So let me talk a little bit about each of these kinds of programs. So I'm just picking one here. So we don't have sort of programs that we kind of pull off of the shelf and replicate over and over. We have several different kinds of models that we use, and then we work with our partners to design the programs specifically so that we are meeting the needs of the communities and we are listening to them in the development of the program. So we kind of come into our partnerships with our ears and eyes open. We sit down and talk with folks and make sure that our program is meeting everybody's needs and interests. So one of the programs that we've done a few times, and most recently we offered it in the Midwest, is a memory box kind of program. And so this is a program where the older adults and the students get together. The students really intentionally develop oral history and interviewing skills, and they do research about different time periods. They interview older adults from the community, and then they give back the stories that were shared with a memory box or other kinds of art making. We've done this program where the youth has made something in honor of the elders. We've also had this program where both of the older adults and the youth are making boxes for each other, which is really powerful and very cool. It just kind of depends on the needs and the interests of our partners. So this picture here on the right is of a very cool memory box that some 8th grade students did last year. And as you can see, there's an air dry clay airplane that's hanging there. This gentleman was a pilot. And this is a picture of some older adult participants with their memory boxes. We often, after we do sort of a memory box ceremony is what we call it, and then we continue the relationship afterwards, and the students design and create other kinds of interactions with the older adults. So this serves as kind of an introduction to each other, and then we continue to work with them to build the relationship outside of that as well. So the second type of intergenerational program models or sort of sectors that we do are Arts for All programs. And so one of the programs that we have done regularly is an Arts in the Parks program. We offer this in public spaces. The most recent iteration of this program was over the summer, where we worked in partnership with the Seattle Parks Department and popped up a couple of tents in between a meal program for older adults and a family meal program near our library. So this is a place where people are already kind of moving and mixing. We created workshops and drop-in opportunities for folks to come and engage. The picture here on the right is a drop-in session where we had youth and older adults create a drop-in session for the community about games. And this was a partnership between a leadership program for middle school students and the East African Senior Center here in the Seattle area. Okay, there we go. And then here are some additional pictures from engagement opportunities under the tents. And we do all different kinds of art forms as part of these programs, visual art, poetry, music. We do sing-alongs. We've done intergenerational hip hop dancing, which has been super fun, folk dancing, and a whole bunch of different kinds of art forms. Our third type of program is our intergenerational theater company. And as I mentioned, it's an original performance piece that's created by the cast members. We choose a word as the center of our work and go through a process where the cast really learns from each other and shares their stories. And then we put it on its feet and tour to different schools and senior centers and so on. And one of the most important parts of this process is not only the performance, but the talk back that happens afterwards. And what we found is that the audience has witnessed this intergenerational model of folks sharing their personal stories from throughout their lives, and they have seen them be vulnerable. And so as a result, the audience feels comfortable being vulnerable themselves. And so the talk back and the story generation and the story sharing is really an important part of the process, and sometimes lasts longer than the performance. It's pretty powerful. These are some additional photos of recent productions. This one here on the left is from a show called Phoenix. Our recent production was Sidewalks, and then the one on the right is from a production called Chairs. So as I've just now sort of talked a little bit about SilverKite's intergenerational program structures, I would say, I wanted to share with you a couple of tips or thoughts, learnings that we've had as sort of general things to think about as you are starting or continuing your intergenerational arts workshops and programs. First of all, it's really important, we've found, to prep participants ahead of the first session, both the youth as well as the older adults, so that they come into these experiences feeling confident. And also it gives you a sense of sort of, you know, where folks are thinking about their age stereotypes, and gives you kind of a baseline to evaluate how participants have changed over the course of a particular program. The second is similar to what Susan was saying before. You got to have a plan, because just having folks in the room together does not intergenerational connections make. So having a structure and having a way, an intentional conversation, an intentional connection being made as part of it. As I mentioned, one of our big principles is thinking about how we can create a program where younger people and older people are teachers and learners. Everyone has something to teach. Everyone has something to learn. And then how can we do something new together? Having something that they can accomplish in one session. So if you are doing an intergenerational program and you're going to create a performance piece after, you know, an 8-week session, having something that they accomplish in one rehearsal time. So for example, you learn a song, or you work on a particular scene, or you finalize some component for that session, really helps to feel like a project is moving forward, and also that you have accomplished something and you feel good about yourself leaving a particular session. So that's something we've heard a lot, having something that they can accomplish in one session. You can build on it later, but you know, having that sort of finale at the end of a session. Finding that thing that you have in common with somebody else helps that initial connection across generations. So really taking the time to help the participants find the things that they have in common with each other can help lay the groundwork for those relationships to be built. And creating multiple ways to encourage conversations and interactions. So finding opportunities for folks to interact by drawing something and then having a conversation. I really liked the masks that Susan shared a little bit ago, and that idea, sometimes it's easier to have conversations when you're not yourself. And so putting on a mask or using a puppet is another way that folks can interact as well. We've also, in thinking about creating intergenerational programs, cultivating community partnerships by talking with folks, by finding partners that are within the same neighborhood or close by, so it's easier for folks to continue to get together after a particular program is over. So that idea of sustainability is something that's really important to think about. What happens after you are finished with your program? What happens after the exhibit? What happens after the performance? We like to also have some kind of public sharing at the end of our programs. And sometimes it is where the participants are just reflecting on their experience together. Sometimes it's a performance or an exhibit or something like that, but having kind of a celebratory end to a program is really important, and also thinking about what comes next. The other thing I wanted to just sort of mention, because in the States, it's a little challenging to find funding to do intergenerational work. So I just wanted to share with you a couple of thoughts about funding, and that is that there are many different ways you can kind of go about finding funding to do your programming. One, if you're a nonprofit organization, there's tons of grants that are out there that you could cultivate. We are not a nonprofit organization, so we have to be super creative about how we pay for our programming. And what we found are a couple of different things. So first, so we do pay for service programming. So when we're doing intergenerational programs, somebody has to pay for it. Either it comes from a senior living community or a school. Sometimes it's divided between the two, and we kind of negotiate that. Sometimes we partner with an organization to write a grant to help sponsor a particular program. Sometimes also we look to government funding. And if you don't know about this particular sort of brain of funding, I'd like to just to share with you and encourage you to look at a CMP program. It's called the Civil Monetary Penalty Fund. And I think most states, if not all states, have a fund like this available. It's through Medicare, and the funds in that pool of money come from fines that are levied on skilled nursing facilities. So if they violate various state or federal codes, they have to pay a fine, and a percentage of that goes into this fund. And so those funds are available for nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations, anybody who would like to apply to receive funds to enhance the quality of life of persons in skilled nursing communities across the country. So they just recently revised their guidelines. So the funding has some restrictions now that they didn't have before. But I encourage you to take a look at that in your state and learn a little bit about the application. They're specifically designed for skilled nursing communities. So that might be an avenue of funding for you as you are considering your intergenerational programs.
That's great, Jen. Good suggestion.
So thanks, everybody. And this is my contact information.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. I'll tell you, between Susan and Jen, there are, like, my mind is going, and how many possibilities there are. And I think that's what's so exciting. It's the process of art making, and you can do it in so many different ways. So whether you're making collages together, doing theater, or singing together, or dancing together, some of the principles that both of you talked about are really, really important to have a successful project. So thank you for sharing all that, and for both of you for your passion. So we're going to go to Jessica in Rhode Island. We've been to London and Seattle. Now we're going to Rhode Island. Jessica is the director of the Child Development Center at the University of Rhode Island. I think it's a lab school. And they're doing a really interesting program, arts program with preschoolers. So I thought we'd focus on our youngest children in this one. So Jessica, take it away.
Great, thanks, Nancy. And we can go right to the next slide. As Nancy said, I'm here at the University of Rhode Island, and I direct the Child Development Center. So we're a laboratory preschool program serving children 3, 4, and 5 years old in NAEYC accredited preschool classrooms. We have 2 sites, one on our main campus in Kingston and one on our urban campus in Providence. Next slide, please. And it was great to hear about this principle of learning through play, because everything we do is based in play with young children. And we really wanted to extend some of these play opportunities and creative arts opportunities to older adults within our community as well. Next slide. And we can skip right over that. So I'm going to jump right into it with our planning and preparation. First, it was so great to hear from Jen and Susan with more established programs. Our program is brand new and small scale to start. So I'll share a little bit about how we began and where we are today. When we started thinking about bringing intergenerational programming to the preschoolers, we knew we wanted to also consult with an older adult development expert within our department. So we're situated within the Department of Human Development and Family Science. And we consulted with Dr. Skye Liedall, who has expertise in older adult development and some intergenerational programming around technology. So she helped us to really think about how to get this up and running and to think about potential partners. You also heard from our other presenters about the importance of collaborative planning. For us, that involved brainstorming collaboratively with our teachers, who were ultimately going to be facilitating these interactions in the classroom. So it was really important that we didn't just come to them and say, we're going to do this great new thing, and here you go, you start on Monday. They were involved from the inception of what types of experiences might we offer? What will our connections with our curriculum be? We wanted to map out timelines that were feasible, and we needed teacher involvement with that piece. We also thought about securing some funding, so we had a couple of small grants, but part of this was also a consideration of making a sustainable framework that wasn't reliant on the continuation of grant funding. So we chose to incorporate projects that were a part of our regular curriculum anyway. Our grant funding from Peace and from ISLES helped to provide some materials and allowed us to then give some arts materials to our program participants. So a set of watercolors to take home, for example. You can move to the next slide, please. So here our project goals are outlined. We wanted to offer a series of collaborative creative art experiences for preschool children. For young adults, those are our undergraduate students at URI who are an integral part of this project as well. And for older adults, and we were targeting a 50+ community here. We wanted to facilitate social connectedness and meaningful intergenerational interactions for all project participants. And as you heard from our other presenters, there had to be a lot of intentionality with that. It doesn't just happen by bringing everyone into the same space. And then our kind of end forward-facing to the community celebration was an intergenerational art show open to the public. And we were thoughtful about having this in a public space. So not only in our school, not only at the site where the older adults were spending the majority of their time outside of our program, but in a public library. Go ahead to the next slide, please. We thought a lot about forming collaborative partnerships. In Kingston, we ultimately partnered with OLLI, our URI Osher Lifelong Learning Institute that offers a catalog of courses for adults 50+. OLLI became an ideal partner for us in terms of location. They're close by. And in terms of collaboration, so their leadership was motivated to be part of this project with us. Communication was effective. On the Providence campus, they don't have an OLLI right nearby, so they partnered with some of the Providence Senior Services sites, some of the Providence community helpers that the children see on their regular walks throughout the city, and a number of grandparents who wanted to get involved. Next slide, please. And just a couple notes about orientation. You heard this from others as well. We knew that it was important to share with the OLLI members and other older adults participating about our program before they walked in the door. So we did some reach out and let people know what the program would entail, what they could give in terms of coming into the preschool, but also what they could get out of it in terms of engagement in creative arts, learning about creative expression in early childhood, and just time to come in and play together, which is so much fun. So we had an orientation session at OLLI before the older adults came into our classrooms. And during that, we also administered a brief questionnaire for OLLI members. And that allowed us to learn more about their individual interests, their experiences. So when we were meeting people before really meeting them in the classroom, instead of just giving teachers a list of names or telling children some older adults are coming to your classroom, we were able to say things like, Jean is coming, and Jean is a fiber artist who loves to paint, and she loves to knit, and she loves to do felting. So we knew a little bit about the folks who would be participating. We also created a Meet the Artists online album, so our older adult participants could have a vision of all of these children before they came in to work with them, and we could see who would be coming into the preschool. It also allowed our parents to see the older adults that would be coming in to work with their children as part of the preschool program. With getting started in the classroom, we knew we needed to give a lot of attention to welcoming people in, making it feel like a comfortable environment. Things as simple as making sure we had plenty of adult chairs around the table on day one were important to take into consideration. Next slide, please. So just a quick look at our artists of all ages engaged in the project. This past spring, we had 64 preschool children, 13 early education teachers, over 30 undergraduate students, and over 30 older adults participating. Next slide, please. I'll give you a very quick look at some of the projects that we selected. One was rolling painting. Again, you could do this individually with your own box at the table as we're warming up and getting started. but then the teachers set out experiences that required everybody to use the same surface. So you can see a child and one of our OLLI members working on the same ramp together to roll balls and toy cars down and spread the paint on the paper. Go ahead to the next slide, please. We did some watercolor painting, and you see people sitting around the table together. We brought in a number of older adult men, not only women. So we think about early childhood education. We have an overabundance of women in our field. And through this project, we saw a presence of more men in our classrooms too. Next slide, please. We did a special place photography project. And there was a family engagement piece here, and it led to some real awareness of similarities. If you'll go to the next slide, you'll see some of this. So you heard I'm in Rhode Island. We're the ocean state. I promise I don't double as a travel agent, but a lot of our photographs of special places were of the ocean and the beach. And we started to have this conversation about why is it special to you? And we were seeing that young children, 3 and 4, older adults, 50 plus, 60, 70 plus, identified the beach as a special place. Next slide, please. Weaving allowed for some face-to-face interaction across a loom. We also passed a loom back and forth between the OLLI entryway lounge and our classrooms. So folks who maybe wanted to participate but couldn't commit to the full-fledged series of interactions we were offering could still get involved by doing some weaving and passing it back and forth. Go ahead, please. I'll skip the 30-second video of weaving in the interest of time, but I can share that link in the chat for you afterwards.
Thanks,
Self-portraits led to a lot of great discussion about similarities and differences. We're investigating our skin tone and texture, our hair color and texture. It was an opportunity for children to ask questions where they might feel a little uncertain in other settings, like, why does your hair look that way? I noticed our skin looks different from each other, and we could facilitate those conversations around the table and hopefully through that reduce some stigma about aging. Next slide, please. And then some 3D construction art. This was an opportunity too for older adults to collect some cardboard tubes and recyclable materials at home, bring them into the classroom. But here you could see projects like were mentioned earlier that required 3 hands. Somebody had to hold one piece steady while somebody else was snipping it or taping it together. So it really required that hands-on collaboration. Next slide, please. And we culminated with an art show. So here's just an example. It was a small space. Our public library is a great partner to us. And we wanted to make this accessible so that folks in our community could see the project, but could also potentially become interested in engaging in future iterations of the project. And that brings me to my next slide with some lessons learned and tips for success. As I mentioned, we're new to this. This is year 2 that you're seeing of the project. We're heading into year 3. So a few things that we've learned, and others are probably well aware of already, but for folks who are just starting off, some things to consider. Ample planning and prep time. We needed to invest a lot of time just into thinking through timelines and structures for the project. So plan on a little more time than you might anticipate. All of that time you're investing into planning and prep is going to pay off tenfold in the sustainability of your project, creating systems that you can use and reuse. We really found it necessary to think about mutually beneficial partnerships and how to nurture them over time, not just establish them at the onset, but to continue to nurture those relationships. We wanted really clear ongoing communication, so we established an intergenerational art project news for all participants to be on the same page and get updates regularly about what we were doing, as well as links to photo albums of the project in process. And we found it really important and continue to seek and implement feedback from everybody, from our older adult participants, from our 3-year-old and 4-year-old voices, and from the teachers who have an essential role in facilitating these interactions in the classroom. So thanks for hearing about our project in Rhode Island, and I would be happy to talk to you about it more in the future if you want to get in touch. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jessica. You know, for only 2 years, you've really thought about a lot of things. And I really appreciate you talking about the preparation and the engagement of the older adults at the beginning and the training with the teachers and also the partnerships. So I think you're off to a great start. And I think that because you've integrated to the curriculum, we hope to see lots and lots of things coming in the future. All right. Well, hopefully you'll all be able to stay with us because we have an exciting final presentation, and then we're going to have some questions and answers. And I know there are things in the chat that we'll address. But Renee Griffin, now you have this long, let me see, you're Creative Aging and Partnerships Officer, which is a title I've never heard before. So I'm really glad I had this in front of me, of the Intergenerational Arts and Wellness Center, which is in Winston-Salem. And Renee will talk to you about the planning that went into this and the actual opening, which is November 17th on Friday. So we appreciate your spending some time with us because I know things must be crazy in Winston-Salem right now. So take it away and let us hear all about your Intergenerational Arts and Wellness Center that's about to open. You're not on.
There I go.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. So thank you for this opportunity. Yes, it's really crazy busy around here, but I'm really excited to have an opportunity to share with more people about Senior Services Intergenerational Center for Arts and Wellness. We are committed to intentional intergenerational interaction, which is something that we've heard from the other presenters as well, the importance of that interaction, that it be some intentionality about making this happen. Senior Services is the leading nonprofit provider of home and community-based services for older adults living in Forsyth County, North Carolina. And our mission is to help older adults remain living in their homes, aging with dignity and living with purpose, as long as they are able. And so when we first started this, there were a few people who wanted to know why intergenerational. We haven't changed our mission at all. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. Everybody here understands the real impact and value of intergenerational relationships. And we were inspired by a lot of the outcomes we saw from programming that took place at our award-winning Williams Adult Day Center, projects with kinder music, research that was done in partnership with Wake Forest University, and other activities that really inspired us to take this work we were doing to a different level. And everything about this venture that we in the beginning were just calling the big idea was designed with an eye towards creating a place where this intentional intergenerational interaction can happen on a daily basis, and also help to build community in ways that spill out and also help to dismantle ageism, another thing that we've heard presenters speaking about today. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of the center. We had our soft opening on October 26th. It is a 62,500 square foot facility located in what we believe is a healthcare desert in the middle of our county. We're located, if you're familiar at all with the area, we're located right in the middle of Forsyth County. If you go in one direction, one of the most affluent neighborhoods in the county, and you go a few blocks in the other direction, a historically underserved neighborhood. And then again, we're just right down the street from a renowned university, Wake Forest University. So what you see there is the front of our new building, as well as an artist's rendering, and then a bird's eye view that allows you to see. We were fortunate to have the land that we built on was a gift to us. So the building on the left is our administrative and program offices that will continue to be there. And then the new building is at the on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. This is the floor plan for our building, and I'll run through it very quickly. The large blue section on the far right, that is the new home of our Williams Adult Day Center. It is 50% larger than our current day center, and we are licensed to serve up to 138 people. Most of our participants are living with memory loss, dementia, or some sort of cognitive impairment. The space above it, which is the second largest space, is the health sciences space for Winston-Salem State University, which is a historic Black college and university here in Winston-Salem. There is nothing like this space anywhere in the country, and there will be students matriculating throughout the space from bachelor's level to PhD level students in occupational therapy, physical therapy, rec therapy, nursing, and health care administration. They will not only have an opportunity to have classes in the space and to do practicum work with participants in the space, but they'll also be providing clinics for the community. The peach space down at the bottom is a child development center that's operated by Family Services. It has 6 classrooms, early Head Start, and eventually, after the first year, we'll probably have some private pay slots as well. But what's exciting about that space is you'll see that there's a kind of a white space that joins the Child Development Center with our Williams Adult Day Center, and that is an intergenerational playground. So we'll have garden boxes in there so they can be planting that's done together, some large scale outdoor musical instruments and seats. And so older adults and children can have planned activities out there, but also can have some organic activities happening just as easily. The yellow space is the home of our Hispanic League. The small pink space right in the middle is the home of Hands On Northwest North Carolina. It's a nonprofit that works with other grassroots organizations and nonprofits, providing a training for their boards and their staff and volunteer recruitment. We're very proud of the fact that we have both of our regional healthcare systems under the same roof in the building. So the light blue is the home of is a satellite Wake Forest, Atrium Health Wake Forest Baptist, a STIC center, which focuses on geriatric care, memory counseling, and caregiver support. So it's really focused on the health needs of the older adults. And then the lime green on the other side of the entrance to the building is Novant Health, which I mentioned this is a healthcare desert somewhat. And so it will provide much needed healthcare in the community with 5 days of each day of service. There'll be a different concentration, cardiovascular one day, diabetes and diabetes education, women's health, and then 2 days that are just focused on multidisciplinary family practice. And they really made those decisions based on the needs of the community. That kind of darker lime green color there is a retail cafe space that is operated by Second Harvest Food Bank's Providence program. And then right next to it is the 2 studio spaces that are operated by the Sawtooth School for Visual Arts. It's a historic nonprofit here that provides art instruction for the community. And then the very light kind of pale color there, kind of light yellow, cream color, are shared spaces. So the colored spaces are all occupied by what we call our dedicated space partners. They're in those spaces every day. The other spaces are shared among not only these partners, but an additional 13 other partners in the community to bring programming into the center. So we have a tech space, we have some meeting spaces, a teaching kitchen, a multi-purpose classroom, and then at the top, next to the purple Winston-Salem State space, is a performance area where there's a stage and a theater. The theater also can function as 2 pickleball courts and a place for the kids to play when they can't go outside. But you'll notice that those white areas all around the building are all outdoor spaces for the building. All of this is tied together with a center atrium space that we call Main Street, complete with a bandstand. Next slide, please. So
Maybe.
we have created some very welcoming, what we believe is a very welcoming entrance into the building. We conducted 6 listening sessions with the community to learn about what would engender for them a sense of belonging and welcome, because it's important to us that everybody in the community feel like this is a space that belongs to them. We heard loud and clear that representation was very important. And so you'll see that we have these beautiful pictures as you enter into the lobby that represent our diverse community, as well as some of iconic Black and white photos that honor the African-American history of Winston-Salem. The color photos that you see are all of actual program participants or participants of our community partners. So these are real people in the community. Next slide, please. So this is an artist rendering of Main Street. And so it's designed to feel like you're outside when you're inside. And so a lot of attention to detail has been given to the design of this space. We think of it as a small pedestrian walkway. We don't ever call it a hall. It's Main Street. You can see there on the left, the very unique roof line that is an homage to the roof line of the Sawtooth School for Visual Art, which is a downtown landmark. The clouds are actually light fixtures, and the bandstand on the right is kind of that center place, an old town, downtown, where people could gather for performances and things of that nature. And if you squint very hard at the very end, you can see that there's a barber pole that indicates that there's a beauty shop and a barber shop for our day center participants down at the very end. All of the partners have access to Main Street, so their storefront entrance or access to Main Street for each of the dedicated space partners. It was designed this way because for older adults, it's around the idea of reminiscence therapy, so that as they move in this space, that it will elicit fond, positive memories. You know, their short-term memories may be very, very limited, but oftentimes their long-term memories remain. And so we really want it to be a very positive experience for everyone there. Next slide, please. So these are some, on the left, you will see some actual pictures of Main Street. So before, those were artist renderings of Main Street. These were taken at the beginning of October. We had a very kind of soft opening luncheon to thank our donors for the building. And you see some people there who are touring, who are walking around and looking at the different spaces. One of the things you can't see very well, but right next to the theater space, atop at the bottom picture on the left is the bottom of a marquee. So it looks like a theater space. We have we call it the welcome kiosk. It looks like a flower cart that we can use as a welcoming place when people first come in. And then when we're having performances in the theater, then we can roll it down. It can serve as a ticketing spaces there. You also see that we're really fortunate to have this mural wall right as you enter into the building off of 30th Street. And we worked as a committee to select a really wonderful artist who designed this this mural to kind of be a landmark for the neighborhood, that about what was happening in this new space. And we had 2 community engagement days where we invited people from the community to participate in painting the mural. So we had people of all ages, all backgrounds, who came and participated in creating this beautiful mural that has been named by the artist as Together Through the Ages. Next slide, please. So I've talked a little bit about the intentional design around the building. I'd like to take just a few minutes to talk about our work around intentional partnerships, because and that's really a large part of what my job is about. That is a title that people are not familiar with, but really being very conscious and intentional about how all these partners are going to work together. So we started out by creating a collaborators agreement that kind of established from the very beginning, as we were having conversations with the organizations that we thought would be really good in this space, about what kind of working relationship we expected, that we expected there to be a lot of transparency and a willingness to be vulnerable in our communications, so that we establish amongst ourselves the kind of community that we're hoping to build within the center and, of course, for the community at large. We also then leveraged existing relationships that we have. Senior Services is an ACL, Alzheimer's disease programs initiatives grantee. And so a lot of the partners that we're working with on that project are also partners with us in the building. And it was an opportunity for us to begin building those relationships. And when we started the grant, to build deeper relationships with people that we knew that were going to be a part of the center. We also have done a lot of grant work with these with our partners, Winston-Salem State, again, the Maya Angelou Center for Health Equity at Wake Forest University, the Shepherd Center, which is our local senior center. And then we've been offering art classes before we moved into this building in partnership with the Sawtooth School, with Authoring Action, which is a creative writing nonprofit, as well as the 40 Plus Stage Company. So we've really just built on those relationships that were already in existence. And then we also have known that the partners in the building, they also already have relationships with one another. So even though some people were used to working together, some people were not. We also hired an independent facilitator who really helped us to focus on building those relationships and really establishing the culture for the building. We started out, we have monthly meetings, and then out of the monthly meetings, we also developed some subcommittees, 7 now, subcommittees to really work independently out during the month on different areas like program coordination, transportation, access and security, community inclusion, and the list goes on. And then at the very end, once we were at a place where we were ready to develop lease agreements, we developed something a little more formal beyond the collaborators agreement to a collaborative charter for the partnership. And we all agreed again on how we were going to work together and the kind of in ways to hold one another accountable for the work that we plan to do. Next slide, please. So here you can see the list of the partners with us in the building and their logos. You'll see that 2 of the partners are part of the programs and services that are provided by Senior Services, our Williams Adult Day Center, and also our Congregate Senior Lunch Site. The organizations that are in blue are our dedicated space partners, and the ones in black are our shared space partners. So you can see we have a wide range of organizations that all make perfect sense to be working together. Everything from our Arts Council and Aperture Cinema, which is a beautiful nonprofit movie house, to Cancer Services and the Trellis Supportive Care, which is our hospice and palliative care organization. University of North Carolina School of the Arts is here, and the Symphony. So we just have really a diverse and wonderful group of professionals who are working with us to bring meaningful arts and wellness interaction into this space. Next slide, please. So some of the ways that we have really worked on, again, this intentional relationship building is by doing the work. our president and CEO, Lee Cummington, and myself, we not only had these monthly meetings, but we also had one-on-one lunches with our partners. So they had an opportunity to really talk to us, tell us how they were feeling, have a chance to ask any questions or express any concerns that they might have. We had lots of community building activities. You see some pictures here from, we included them, of course, in our groundbreaking and our topping off ceremony, where the final beam of the building was signed by all the partners. The final metal beam, I should say, was signed by all the partners. We provided lots of opportunities for them to tour the site, for their boards, for the media, whatever they needed. We send lots of surveys out there to them to collect information. So we sent surveys about our upcoming ribbon cutting on Friday. It's going to be an immersive experience. So the actual ribbon cutting is going to take about 10, 15 minutes. But then for the rest of the day, we're opening the doors to the community to come in and have an immersive experience of the different types of activities that can take place here. And through a survey, we've started gathering information from the partners. What are you going to do on that day? What are you going to bring? And then in terms of volunteer opportunities, we invited our partners to participate with us in March for Meals. We are members of Meals on Wheels America. And so they help to deliver meals one day. And I think that's it. I mean, but all of that has been about us building relationships with one another. Next slide, please. And this is my final slide.
About a minute more.
Okay, so we did focus on intentional programming. We had a partners retreat. We started our work together a year ago in November, where we did some speed dating. And so partners who perhaps don't normally work together had a chance to do some brainstorming around the types of programs they would bring into the building. And then after about 15 minutes of discussion, we rang the bell and they rotated and they got to talk to someone else. So that was really, really important. And I can stop there.
Well, you know what? This is so exciting, Renee. I mean, I have heard about this over the last year, and I've talked to you a couple of times, but to actually see the photos and to, what I really appreciate is all the very intentional thoughtfulness about how can you be intentional about fostering these interactions, and how do you build partnerships? And we know through all the presentations today, building partnerships, whether it's with the teaching artist, with an arts program, with a aging or a youth organization, is really, really important. So thank you all. I think we'll all give them a round of applause. Then we'll get to some questions. I also just wanted to say that not all of this is through the shared site network, but there's so many places that can be shared sites. And it's that word intentionality that's so important, that if there's a public space or a childcare center or an aging center or a place like this, if you're intentional about creating those connections, the wonderful things can happen. So Sherry, do you want to read some of the questions and we can have the panelists respond?
Yeah, since I haven't had my screen up because I've been sharing the slide, the only question that I had checked, and I'll go back, is someone asked, how do you evaluate intergenerational arts programs, particularly smaller programs? So I don't know if folks could share about what they do in terms of evaluation.
Anybody?
So I'm willing to chime in as a small program. And, just getting started, our evaluation has been in the form of surveying program participants, doing some focus group with teachers, and thinking about getting those voices of everybody involved, not only the older adults, but also the teachers who are facilitating those interactions. And then in terms of reporting to our funders, reporting to our university, we're capturing things that are really quantifiable in terms of numbers of program participants, how many people are we reaching, demographics of program participants as well. And others who have well-established programs might want to add to that. How are you evaluating your larger programs too?
Susan or Jen? Yes, Susan, go ahead.
I guess the different programs and projects have different methodologies, but we look at individual goals for individuals, goals for the community or group, and it might be the wider community, or it might be the community of a care home or a school, and then arts goals as well. So arts might be around the skills, the confidence that people have, whether they feel they've made progress, whether their artworks show that. But around individuals, it might be around well-being measures, it might be around communication for young people, it might be around just attendance for some people who don't normally stick with anything. It depends what the focus of our partners is in wanting to join in. And I guess in terms of collecting, if possible, we use the art forms that we've used in the project for doing the evaluation and gathering that material. So for instance, if we were looking at one across the board, is somebody also spoke about working with children and adults separately before they meet and doing some orientation. If you got people to draw a picture of what you think an older person or a younger person looks like, and then you get those out in 12 weeks' time, people will sometimes laugh at what their thoughts were and what they put into those pictures. And they might even show them and be really embarrassed to the other group, but you can actually log the change in people's attitudes and they can see it for themselves. So I think using the art forms is sometimes what they're there for and what they've chosen to join. So getting out the forms can stop people talking, but using drama or visuals can be really useful.
Great, thanks. And Jen, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I agree with what Susan was just sharing. And we try to have at least 3 ways that we're collecting data from each of our programs. And I really liked what Jessica was saying about making sure that all of the voices of the participants were heard. And some of the younger participants may not be able to read or complete a survey and those kinds of things. So, and we often work with persons with a dementia, and in capturing their voices and their feelings about program participation, we started just in this last year using these particular cards that are called mixed emotions, which are really great. A friend of mine who's a psychologist recommended them to me. And so each of these cards has a word on it and an image that reflects that particular word. So as persons with dementia come into our programs, we set out the same, 8 different cards with different emotions as they come in, and they can choose which one, or they can tell us how they're feeling that day. And then we also capture that data as they're leaving. And to sort of see if there's any kind of change in the way that they're feeling or their mood as, in that particular moment. So I just wanted to share that as a method that we developed in this last year that's been really effective.
That's great. As always, just with programming, evaluation needs to be sensitive to the abilities of people, their cognitive state, their age, their cultural background. So I think it's important. And I would encourage all of you to connect, if you can, with some institutions of higher education where there are students that might be interested in helping you develop some of this research. I think this is one example of where we don't know enough about the specific research for intergenerational arts programming. So we've had just a really, I think, a fascinating discussion, and we want to think about how do we go to the next step. Do we want to have people doing intergenerational arts talking to each other about evaluation methods, about different kinds of art forms, what works with certain populations? Do men tended to go to one thing? What works with little kids versus with college students? So we will be reaching out to you if you are doing an intergenerational program now, and many of you are. I've looked at the chat. And you weren't included, please send us a list. Please look at the Shared Site Network newsletter. I didn't get a chance to put everybody in, but there are a lot of different kinds of programs there. Not that you would do the exact program, but hopefully this all is intended to inspire you to think about how can you integrate creativity and the arts into what you're doing to further enhance the relationships that people have. So I want to thank the presenters. I'm going to go back to you, Sherry, if you want, but I want to thank the presenters. I think you all did a fabulous job. I've learned a lot. I'm really excited about taking these learnings and sharing them with others. And again, let us know what you're doing. Are there any other comments that people would like to make? We have about like maybe 2 minutes. Anybody else have something they want to say?
Nancy, I just wanted to share, I put in the chat the link for the Shared Site newsletter. I know that Susan shared some resources that they've developed. We had another question about like resources. That Susan had shared some resources, Jen shared some resources, Jessica, that there are resources at the newsletter, at the end of that newsletter. So check that out. Some great Lifetime Arts also has some great intergenerational resources. They're listed in the newsletter as well. So, and if other folks have resources that they'd like us to share, send them our way. And we will definitely love to add them to that.
All right. Well, it is, I think it's 1:30 here, Susan. I guess it's a little later there in London. But thank you all for being part of this. We really hope that this will continue to be a community. We encourage you to come to our next Shared Site Network and check out all the resources on the Shared Site Network newsletter, because I think there's a lot that can really be helpful to you. So everyone have a great afternoon or evening, and hopefully we will see you at our next Shared Site meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Everyone, goodbye.
Thanks. Write any comments in the chat.